Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to today's episode from Muslim Podcast. Today, we will be exploring topics that affects every Muslim, regardless of where they live. What is Muslim identity in the modern world? In a world that is constantly changing, it can sometimes feel challenging to stay true to who you are as Muslim. With the blending of culture, social media, and global influences, the question of what it means to be Muslim today is more important than ever. In this episode, we will dive into the core elements that shape our identity, from our faith, our cultural traditions, to the pressures we face in society. We will discuss how to balance our religious beliefs with the demands of modern life and exploring ways to stay connected to our Islamic values, no matter where you are, wherever you are navigating life in multicultural society or simply seeking to strengthen your identity as Muslim. This conversation is for you. Let's get started. And before starting, let's welcome our guest today, Sheikh Tariq Ata, instructor of Institute of Knowledge, religious director of OCIF, and a board member of Islamic Shura Council, Southern California. Welcome, Sheikh. Sheikh, in the beginning, the first question come in our minds: how do we define Muslim identity in a world that constantly evolving and changing?
So bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. That question has multiple aspects, right? So let's try and go through them one by one. Why do we see this massive change? Right? It seems like every decade is completely different than the previous one. And it seems like it's only going to get, the changes are going to become even quicker and quicker with the coming of AI and all these other technologies. I imagine that you'll be able to translate entire books within seconds.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now you have Google Translate. You could communicate with people who speak completely different languages in real time, right? So you have a lot changing, but why is the human changing so much? Right? Why does it feel like our generation, say the generation of millennials, there's a lot of difference than the generation of Gen Z, and even more so when it comes to, let's say, the Gen X, Generation X, our parents' generation, the previous one. They're very different. Now, of course, world events plays an impact, right? If you were growing up during the Depression, you have a certain mindset. You're growing up through World War II, you have a certain mindset. But where we should focus on is the following. The human being is the human being. Their desires will always be the same.
Yes.
From Adam alayhi salam till today.
Yeah.
Our desires are the same exact thing. Our ambitions are generally the same. Livelihood and well-being. It's the same. How we pursue it might differ. The avenues which we take might differ. The opportunities differ. But really, the human being is the same.
The same, yes.
Right? Very predictable. But why do people today feel like they can't keep up? They have to keep changing their identity. And this is kind of the second aspect here. And that is because there really is no clear definition of what it means to be a human being.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? At least in the West. And so it's very easy for a new trend to come in that is very different in terms of human expression or the human experience than a previous generation. Right now they're testing LGBT and all of this stuff. Well, let's see how this works for us. Who knows what next generation is going to bring, right? So where the Western world has, I would say, failed miserably is when it comes to understanding the human being, right? Before we can even understand Islam's role, religion, the role of religion when it comes to culture or identity, these religions came to guide who? Guide the human,
yes.
right? And just to kind of clarify this point a little bit, it's like saying it's like discussing human rights. And in all of our minds, globally, when you hear this phrase or this term, human rights, something automatically comes to our minds,
What
right?
is human first?
No, but when we think of human rights, we already have a set of ideas of what that looks like,
Yes.
right? But when you actually dive into the particulars, the actual human rights, right, that were declared by the UN, however many decades ago, in order to determine what is the right of the human being, you need to understand what the human being is.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you fail at understanding the human, you'll fail at providing them with the proper
human
rights,
Yes.
right? So when you look at the Western world, how does the Western world define the human being? And we can go into all the philosophical discussions and whatnot. I don't really think that's that important for our experience as as Muslim Americans, because in the end, only one of them has really taken root in society. And this tends to happen in human history. You have all these different philosophies discussing a particular issue. One is kind of adopted by broader society.
Yes.
Right? So when you read books written by Westerners that analyzes the human being, they're constantly taking their discussion back to evolutionary biology. They're constantly making statements like back when we were cavemen. They will even bring animals, our animal instincts. So what I've understood from Western, writings and research and whatnot is that the Western world views the human being as almost synonymous to an animal. You take the very renowned philosopher Noam Chomsky, right? And he's always talking about global warming and the threat of nuclear disaster, right? He's always talking about this. Literally in every single interview he does these days, he's bringing this up. And in one interview that I listened to, he mentioned that, we human beings, basically I'm paraphrasing here, we're animals, we just happen to dominate all the other animals. And this is the way he seems to understand the human being, right? We are really no different than other animals. The only difference is that somehow we evolved in a way that gave us many advantages over the rest of the animal kingdom, right? Now, if in my mind I define myself as an animal, I'm no different than another animal.
That has mind to
Then
think.
what you see, well, you see this in serious scholarly writings, that they start to look to animals to inform human behavior.
To apply it.
Almost to apply it, right? You see this in LGBT. Oh,
Yes,
animals do this.
Yes.
Okay, if animals do it.
Even some animals cannot do it.
Even though that's wrong, right?
Yeah.
That's not a fact. But the idea is they're looking to animals to inform our behavior.
Yes.
Now,
To apply their behavior in our behavior.
exactly, right? So the Western world simply does not have a proper definition of what it means to be a human being. And thus, when technology changes,
They change it, the definition.
they change
of
tremendously.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing.
So they make it as a follower, not a leader.
They have
In a
nothing
definition.
to keep them within a certain paradigm. So anything new comes, they try and adjust their humanness to adapt to the technology.
So the effect comes from the technology to the human beings.
Just in
Not-
our
not the
current
opposite.
experience,
Yeah.
right? So why? But why is that the case? Because they don't have a definition for what it means
That
to be
fixed
me.
one that we can apply everything
Right?
on it.
Exactly. So it's like a person who doesn't know what career they want. So they're constantly hopping from one thing to another thing to another
Yeah,
thing,
he's
another
trying
thing,
until
right?
he finish.
Until they try and find something that works. This is what's going on with the Western world, is why it's changing so much. Or else the same technologies are coming to the Middle East.
Yes, but not
Right.
the same effect.
It's not having the same effect.
Yes.
It's having an effect, right?
Yeah,
Don't
but
get me wrong.
Not that much.
Not as clear.
Yeah.
Right? Why? Because it's simply more defined in the minds of the people in the Muslim world as a whole. In fact, not just the Muslim world, in the global South or the Eastern world, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Because what it means to be a human being is much more well defined. It's not perfectly defined, but it's more well defined. Now, of course, we're going to say as Muslims, our understanding of human being is perfectly defined. Because why?
Yes.
Because Allah defined it for us.
Exactly. We have our book to explain for us what is exactly the humans, so we can apply the identity on the definition that we have already.
Exactly, right? So when Muslim philosophers discussed the human, they tried to define the human being, and this is integral to the conversation because it's about identity.
Exactly.
If we want to have an identity, like the word identity is to identify something. Like you can clearly it's identifiable. I know this because it has an identity. It's defined, right? So how did the Muslim scholars go about this? You'll find in the works of the Muslim philosophers, they will define the human being as haywanun natiq, as a species that has language, which is true,
Yes.
right? Adam alayhi, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about the creation of Adam, so the Baqarah, the first conversation the Quran has about the origins of the human being, it mentions, right? وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ, right? ثُمَّ عَرَضَهُمْ, right? فَأَنْبِئُونِي. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying one of the first things He gave to the human being is language.
Exactly. Yes.
Right? Now, when the Muslim philosophers are defining the human being, they're looking at it from the lens of how are we different than all these other species.
So
Right?
this is the first difference
This
that
is one.
Allah mentioned. The first one that Allah mentioned
One
in the
of
Quran.
yeah, right,
Yes.
one of them.
Yeah.
Right? So clearly, human beings are much more developed. Allah developed the human being much more in comparison to animals when it comes to language, communication. Right? And then the second definition the Muslim philosophers gave is haywanun aqil, a species that is rational. It could rationalize things. And we can understand how that differentiates us from the rest of creation, right? We clearly have more rational capacity. And Allah also points this out in the same verse. وَعَلَّمَ.
Yes.
Adam was taught, meaning his ability to
Learn.
right? And then to take that knowledge which is in the brain and then spit it out
And
to
taking
communicate
decisions,
it, right? It's very unique, right? But there's a third opinion which often doesn't get the attention it needs to get. And that is the phrase لا إنسان بلا أخلاق. Right? So الإنسان حيوان ذو خلق is a species that has character, that has manners. Etiquettes, right? Or we can say values, morals, principles. Now, when you compare the human to animals, animals have an amount of rationale, right? They have an amount. It's very basic, but they have an amount.
Yes. Compared
Right?
to the humans, yes.
They understand that there's territory. This is my territory. If someone tries to right? Dogs can be taught things. Animals can learn, right?
Mercy from the mother to the...
Exactly. There is an amount. Language, there might be amount of communication within a species,
But
right?
without language.
We don't call it language, but there's an amount of communication.
Exactly, yes.
Right? But when it comes to the values or the morals,
Ethics.
the ethics, it's almost absent, completely absent in the animal kingdom.
Yes, sure.
Almost completely. Like a lion will kill its cub, right? Fathers have no role in the lives of their offsprings. The role of the mother is in so much as the animal can sustain itself.
To the point that we call the person without manners an animal.
Exactly,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
That's how it is in the Arab world.
Yeah.
So you have this, right? All three are true. And so you find Islam focuses on good akhlaq when it comes to speaking.
Yes, exactly.
ليس المؤمن بطعان ولا لعان ولا فاحش ولا متفاحش ولا بذيء. Right? The language, the word choices of a Muslim is not vulgar. It's not cursing. It's not explicit. They don't intentionally try to create a reaction, like a negative reaction through their language, right? And of course, the Quran is a book of language, right?
Yes.
This is how Allah communicates.
The miracle of the Quran is the language.
And the knowledge.
Yeah.
يرفع الله الذين آمنوا منكم والذين أوتوا العلم درجات.
Yes.
Right? Knowledge is incredibly important, as this verse is saying, that Allah raises the ranks of the believers, especially the believers who seek knowledge. إنما يخشى الله من عباده العلماء. Right? Those who have true consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who are emotionally connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the people of knowledge. Those who take knowledge and then use that as a means of connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the third one, of course, إنما جئت لأتمم مكارم الأخلاق. And the Prophet ﷺ came to perfect good character. Right? So all three are true. And a complete believer is somebody who is practicing all three. Now, how does this all relate to identity?
Identity, yes.
If we want to define ourselves, well, we need to know what the self is, what the human being is. And now that I have a framework in terms of the human experience that is defined not by me or so and so, it's defined by Allah and His Messenger,
His messenger.
alayhi salatu wassalam. Now I know where I need to focus, right? We need to develop language that we use to express ourselves, right? Somebody who does not know how to express themselves, it could lead to a lot of emotional distress. You know, a kid who, a toddler whose language development is slow, will have a lot of outbursts. Why? Because they're trying to communicate something to their
cannot express
parents.
himself.
They need something. They don't know how to express themselves, so they resort to anger.
Yes.
Right? Even people who are frustrated, adults who are frustrated, they're going through pain inside, but they don't know how to express it. They will often resort to anger.
Yeah.
Right? At least men, they'll resort to anger. And I heard the other day, anger is a symptom in men, is a symptom of depression. Right? And same thing with knowledge, and same thing with akhlaq.
Yes.
So we express our Islamic identity through these venues of the human experience because it's universal now. Every one of us is a human being, but not every one of us is a believer. So how do I connect to another human being? I'm not going to connect it through my iman or through my theology, right, to my religious beliefs, because we're not on the same page there. There might be some overlap, but in general, they're not going to listen to me because Rasulullah said this. Right? That's not how I'm going to talk to them. But rather, if I can learn to express the human through these venues, express Islam through the human venue, now we're able to connect a little bit more with the people around
I'm showing
us.
people these three elements while we are connecting to the people and communicating with people, so they can judge us through these three elements that you
Not
said.
judge us. We don't care about their judgment, right? We don't
No, I
care how
mean,
they
yeah.
perceive us. But no, this is an important point because a lot of Muslims are worried how they're going to perceive us. We shouldn't be worried, right? The Western world is lost, and I don't mean that in a condescending way. The Western world is lost. Western philosophy has failed the Western world. You see the symptoms of this.
Yeah.
People want something new. I do believe
Every
the
time
average American is a very decent person, right? They have a decent heart, right? They're not monsters. They are people trying to go about their day-to-day life with just what they need. They're to themselves, right? And so they're longing for something that actually provides them that. They're sick and tired of corporations screwing them over. They're sick and tired of their politicians who really serve their donor class. They're sick and tired of
social media as it affects everyone.
all these ideologies. Just take them left and right. They're sick and tired of Hollywood, which is spewing utter nonsense, right? They want something new. And we have something to provide them. We have what they're looking for. It's about how do we communicate that to them.
Exactly. Yes.
Right? So when we have a better definition of the human being, not only do we now have a better way of communicating our Islam to the fellow human being, we also have a kind of a fortification over this monster system that's constantly changing the human being, right? The Muslim community, while obviously affected by all that's going on in the West because we're living here, our ability to make the most out of it, I think, is much more noticeable than maybe other aspects of our population.
So that drives us to the next questions. What are the key elements that shape a Muslim's identity today? Is it faith, culture, or something else?
Well, obviously our aqidah, right? Our beliefs shape our worldview. How do I interact with the world? You interact based on what you believe. So in the Western world, what do they believe in really? What is a true belief? Right? So I'll give you a story here. When I was in Jordan, there was a gentleman who lived in Germany for a good portion of his life. And he was a practicing Muslim always. And so once, when he would work, when he would need to do salah, he would go outside the warehouse
pray,
and just pray in a corner. And so some random German guy just passed by him and saw him and just kind of stood there and waited till he finished. So he said, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, assalamu alaikum. He just sees this guy standing there. And the German asks him, what are you doing? And this guy responds, I'm worshiping my creator. And so the Muslim asked the German, what do you worship? And the German laughed, took out his wallet. No, he took out his wallet and took out their bill, like money. He said, I worship this, right? Now, he's being very honest, right? Like what I understand from that story, that German isn't trying to make a mockery. He's not making fun of the Muslim. He's actually being quite honest.
He's direct.
This is what the Western philosophy has taught.
Yes.
This is the
He
epitome
was
of
raised
value.
up that I'm.
It's
yeah,
not
the
him
money
who's
is
raised
the
up.
most
That's the
important thing.
culture,
Yeah.
right? And this is incredibly important for us to understand, because if the belief system is capitalism, and forget about it as a system of organizing economics, right? Any system that you integrate into a society will have an impact on the mentality of the people.
Yes.
Right? Hence, Muslims who come from countries where there are very, very brutal dictators, right? When they come even to the West, they still retain a lot of that mentality.
Yes. Until they.
Well, why should I shouldn't vote? It doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference. Why do you think it doesn't make a difference? Well, it didn't make a difference there,
Because the culture there is the same.
right? So even if you have iman, right, there's still other factors that can
Effect on your.
affect. Right? Of course, aqidah is meant to free us from all of that, but that's a process. The idea is the systems at play shape a worldview. They shape they inform our day-to-day interactions, our social experiences. So even if somebody is a very devout Christian, or a very devout Muslim, or a very devout Jew, or a very devout Buddhist, or whatever, if their day-to-day interactions with their fellow human beings is based on capitalism, then that's going to affect the way they understand the human experience,
Yes.
whether they realize it or not, right? Just like in the time of the Prophet, ﷺ, tribalism affected the people. They were mushrikeen. They worshipped all these other gods, and they had these, fairy tale stories, and they truly believed it. But when it comes to the actual day-to-day interactions with people, it was tribalism. It wasn't the principles of shirk,
Yes.
right? So,
And even today, the Muslim countries, they can find the difference between a country and another, one with the culture of each country. So the culture affects after the faith. So first, as I understand from your talk, is faith first comes first, and then we have extra effects from other elements like the culture, like social media, like the society itself. It has a big effect on the Muslim.
it could have a big effect,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't necessarily have to have a big effect, and I'll kind of segue into that here in just a moment. The idea is the belief system of the West is really a belief system of capitalism. So you have these conversations. Do you have an abundance mindset, or do you have a scarcity mindset? Here they're looking at a mindset. How does a human being think? How should they? When you say what kind of mindset do you have, what you are saying is, how do you approach issues?
It differs from person to
Of course, right? But look at how they're analyzing this. There's a presumption in these two mindsets that the way humans, or the way the Western world approaches issues, is based on resources.
Exactly, yes.
So are you somebody who feels comfortable that there's enough to share? Or are you somebody who's anxious that there isn't enough to share? So the entire mindset is based on what? Resources. Whereas when you look at the Muslim mindset, and this isn't my term, I heard this, right? But it's beautiful. What kind of mindset does Islam, the Aqeedah of Islam, give to the believer? It is
يحب
a,
لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه.
sure, right?
Yes.
You love for your fellow Muslim what you love for yourself, right? That is a mindset. However, what this gentleman is saying is, the mindset is an assured mindset. I am assured. Your rizq, your provisions,
It's from Allah.
it's from Allah.
So
You
you
guarantee them.
Yeah.
Okay? When a calamity happens, what? It's by the qadr of Allah.
Yes, we return back to Allah.
right?
إنا لله وإنا
And
إليه راجعون.
anything bad, كله عجبا لأمر المؤمن.
كله أمر
Amazing is the affairs of the believer.
Yeah.
It's all good for them. What is this doing to the mindset of the person who adopts this aqidah?
No worries.
Assurance.
Yeah.
You're going to worry, but you'll be assured that, okay, things will work out. Allah has a plan here. You're assured. And notice, this isn't, it doesn't center around provisions. It doesn't center around anything worldly. It centers around this idea that there is a force out there,
that controls
Allah subhanahu wa
everything.
ta'ala,
Yes.
who is actively engaging in our lives
Yes.
and actively intervening in our lives to assure us that, hey, this worldly stuff, I'll take care of it for you because you have something more noble to pursue, and that is your afterlife. That is your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah, for us as Muslims, we have a trust of Allah. That's
Aqidah creates that trust,
Exactly.
right? So our Aqidah, going back to identity, it shapes our identity and then informs our behavior. So in the mind, like wallahi, we Muslims, we take this for granted. When we invite each other and we kind of pay for each other's bills, like when we go to a restaurant,
yeah,
and we fight for the bill.
for who will
Right?
pay. Yeah.
Actually, the non-Muslims in America, it's utterly shocking. Shocking.
Even in the same family, they can
Even
pay for
it's
each other.
shocking, right? There's a difference between that we don't do that, we do it a different way, versus I'm shocked that you even do this. Like they can't wrap their head around it. You know, when I first came back from Jordan, I was in a mall, and I got some pretzel bites. You know,
Yeah.
You know, in the Middle East and other parts of the world, it's common courtesy that you just share with someone else.
For sure.
Even somebody you don't know. Like you're sitting next to somebody you don't know them.
The default there.
It's fadla, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So I still have this habit, and there's this elderly man sitting across from me. So I say, would you like some? And the guy, he says,
Are you sure?
he's shocked. Like, it's not just, he's almost scared.
Yeah. Maybe
Right?
something, yes, in this verse.
Scared.
Yeah.
And one of my community members, he shared a funny story. He said that, mashallah, he's well-to-do. And so he has a neighbor who was going through a very, very rough time. He got sick. He couldn't go to work. He lost his job. Financially, he was deteriorating. So as a Muslim, he says, as a Muslim, if I go to sleep and my neighbor is hungry, I'm not a true believer.
This is the main difference between us and them.
Right? So he starts giving him money. I'm talking about like large amounts of money. And so his neighbor is like, what do you want from me? And this Muslim brother is, I don't want anything.
I just want to see
It's like, no, what do you want from me? It's like, yeah, our religion informs us to do this. He said, no, you must want something from me. He said, wallah, he stopped talking to me.
Because they are not used to have this.
It's not just, it goes against the worldview.
Exactly. Yeah,
So they're almost like they're threatened. It's like, this is a threat. I got to protect myself.
Nothing for free.
Right? It's not that they're bad people. It's the worldview that the West has created revolves entirely around resources, and even more so, you need resources because you use those resources to indulge yourself in desires. This is it, right? And this isn't my personal analysis. When you go back to some of the most prominent Western philosophers that shaped our current times, Rousseau, right? He mentions this. He's like, the reason God created this universe is to make us happy. And to make us happy, we human beings are happy when we engage our desires. So Allah created the universe in a way that indulges our desires, gratifies our desires. This is his words. And so when you look at it today, he's saying this hundreds of years ago.
And it's applied in the
today,
the
it's
current
a
society,
pinnacle
yes.
of what he was saying, right? Now, again, there were many Western philosophers. This idea coming from this man is what happened to take root, right? There are multiple factors for that, but that's beyond the scope of our conversation. So kind of going back to this question again, our expression, our identity is informed by our aqidah. But we want to be very, very careful not to fall into the trap of many Muslims who the entire religion revolves around proper aqidah, and that's all we talk about, and we stop the conversation there. Okay, well, I just said that aqidah is the most important thing that informs our identity.
But we
Yes,
have a lot of
but you
fix
don't
that.
have an identity unless you are engaging other people,
You're not a monk.
right? Exactly. It's not just we're not a monk. It's also the idea of an identity. You cannot have an identity unless you are engaging other things,
Yes, to express your aqidah with other people.
right?
So
So the Prophet, the companions for the first 13 years in Mecca, they were developing their aqidah. The primary conversation during those years was the development of aqidah,
Aqidah, yes.
right? And I mean aqidah in its very broad sense, including tawakkul and what we call today tazkiyah, right? And then once that took root, when they went to Medina, Medina was a place where they learned how to express their aqidah in the culture,
in the society.
in the society, in their day-to-day interactions, in the institutions that they built. And this is a very important point we'll get to in
Yeah.
a little bit, right? In the institutions that they built, in how they engage their fellow human being,
And the market.
right?
And
So their aqidah is expressed.
Yes.
And it's not expressed by قال Allah and قال Rasul only, right? That's part of it. But it's so rooted in their day-to-day affairs that it's like, why did you do this? Oh, well,
Yeah, because we have a
right?
reference.
We have a reference.
Yeah.
You see?
So the next question is, how does the concept of Ummah, the global Muslim community, influence how Muslims view themselves and their rules in the world?
Yeah. So, Joel Hayward, he's a revert, and he wrote a book called The Leadership of Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam, and he's by profession a military strategist. So he brings that background into analyzing the Prophet. He does a wonderful job, absolutely wonderful job. So he engaged this concept of the ummah. And the way he presented it, like he's presenting it in a very practical way. His main audience is actually non-Muslims, right? Even though Muslims have a lot to benefit from that book. So I highly recommend it. But the way he presents the ummah concept is the ummah was his method of eroding the social structures of the time and replacing it with another structure that allows for our beliefs to actually inform our social experience. So he pinpoints tribalism. What's tribalism? Tribalism is you identify based on the tribe that you are born into. And so their last names, they weren't last names, but their last names were their tribe names. Sometimes a tribe,
It's like big families and
right?
yeah.
Al-Juhani, Al-Qurashi, Taymi or Tamimi.
It's the same like the Prophet ﷺ in its time that was in Quraysh. We have
Right, so this is how-
Al-Hashim, the tribes that were famous in this time.
Right? So that's how they identify. That's a huge part of their identity. And it informed their social experiences to the extent that, my tribesmen, I have to protect them at all costs, regardless of what my fellow tribesman does. If my fellow tribesman goes and murders someone and admits, yeah, I murdered them without right,
Yeah.
by merit of tribalism, I must protect that person.
And pay for him if you have to pay or
I have to protect them, defend them, even against those who are seeking justice. Is tribalism. Haq, batil, doesn't matter.
we have it in the Prophet ﷺ hadith, انصر أخاك ظالما أو مظلوما.
No, but
And
this
the
is not what
explanation.
we're talking about. It's not. The Prophet is mentioning something completely different. Because if your brother is oppressing, you stop them.
Yes.
What tribalism is doing, we're going to protect you against justice,
Oh no.
right?
Yeah.
When the victim of the murdered or the family of the victim
Trying to take
is trying to get their rights,
rights.
no, I have to protect this
to
person.
defend him even if he's in the
Why? Because of tribalism.
Oh yeah.
Right? And there are reasons why tribalism forms, but again, that's beyond the scope of our conversation. The idea is tribalism was informing their social interactions, their social
As Allah subhanahu wa
experiences.
ta'ala said in the Quran, عصبية الجاهلية.
عصبية الجاهلية,
So
right?
this is this is
حمية
exactly-
الجاهلية.
حمية الجاهلية.
Right? This vigorness of tribalism. It
Whatever
informs their behaviors, right? And it becomes, my value is based on my tribe.
Value,
That's
yes.
where I get my value. Hence, al-asabiyya al-jahiliyya, da'wa al-jahiliyya.
Even if
We
it's
are these
wrong.
people. We are those people, right? It's what informs value. Now, there's a problem. You can't have proper aqidah when you think your value comes from
Another
who your
source.
great, great,
Yeah.
great, great grandparents are.
Yeah.
You can't have proper aqidah. You can't worship Allah as al-adil, as the just one, if your concept of justice is secondary to
The
the
tribe.
tribe.
Yeah.
This is a major problem. And it's also the means for division. The Prophet came to unite people, right? So you have this in the way. How did the Prophet ﷺ change this? You know, when you think of it, when you actually look at this is a borderline impossible task. It's very difficult, right? So in our communities here in Southern California, it's very diverse.
Yeah, we have a lot of.
Have you ever tried getting the Arabs and the Desis together?
No.
Right? Try it. It's a fun experience, right? And I don't mean that they're doing it because they're tribalistic, but
Mindset.
the mind, oh, these are my people. I relate to them more. Yeah, this is my brother, mashallah, you know, we have nothing against them, but these are kind of my people.
This is close to me
Right.
more than this guy.
So it's very difficult to bring people of different cultures, of different backgrounds together and unite them, especially when it's very rooted.
I believe this is the hardest rule that the Prophet ﷺ was trying to do in the Muslims in that time.
We think it's impossible.
Yes.
But the way Hayward he explains how the Prophet did it, it's that wallah, it's so easy. He did it through the concepts of the ummah. What does it mean? He said, when a person becomes Muslim, they do what? They give the bay'ah. And in the bay'ah, the Prophet would say, you give allegiance, that you will do your salah, that you will give your zakah, that, and there were a few other things, and there's a few hadith in this regard. The Prophet didn't say you will no longer affiliate with a tribe. He didn't say you had to change your tribal last name. He changed some people's first names, but not their tribal names, right? But what's happening here? Essentially, when a person becomes a Muslim and they give the bay'ah, they do it under the condition that they're going to change their priorities.
You're gonna keep your tribe, but
Keep your tribe.
You apply Muslim.
Your priorities change.
Yes.
Right? So okay, I'm not ready to give up my tribe. Can you imagine? The Prophet said you have to disavow your tribe. Would any of them accept?
A lot of them would refuse.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Why
In the
should? This is
beginning,
my
yes.
family, right?
Yeah.
You're sitting there preaching goodness to parents, excellence towards parents, and you want me to say I disavow from my
So this
from
is
my
a conflict.
tribe?
Yeah.
So here, the Prophet, this is genius. Of course, it's from Allah subhanahu
Yes.
wa ta'ala, but this is genius. You know, change the priorities. And you're doing it because now you belong to an ummah.
So by time you're gonna see that the importance of being brothers in Islam is more important than
Exactly. And
Yes.
tribalism begins to just
exactly
fade away.
Yeah. By the time
By the next generation, the generation that's born into Islam,
So-
I'm born into this idea that we're an ummah.
we are all equal, so
Right.
no difference between Arabi and Ajami illa bil
Right.
taqwa, as the Prophet ﷺ said.
And even when, like, the case of an entire tribe coming into Islam, like Ghifar, the tribe of Abu Dhar,
Yes.
radiyallahu ta'ala an, you know, they weren't told, yalla, come and just leave your tribe and whatever. Yes, hijrah was an obligation, but it wasn't just this abandonment of your tribe. You're still Ghifar. And the Prophet ﷺ, sometimes, I mean, in a hadith, he actually praised certain tribes, right? However, now, their tribal expression only energized their commitment to these new commitments, right? So this ummah concept, when you look at it from a more strategic lens, like what bay'ah is, it's actually quite simple to implement.
And also, I believe the Prophet ﷺ was investing these tribes in the ghazawat when he's depending on some of them, that some of the tribes was famous of the war. They were clever in fighting. So he invests these tribes to serve the Islam.
Exactly. Like,
But
for example,
this is-
the
this is-
Umayyas.
that was very, very smart.
Bani Umayyah, for example,
Exactly, yes.
were political geniuses. They were
Yeah.
very savvy politically. So even in the time of the Prophet, ﷺ, he started to put these Umayyads in different places. And then Abu Bakr came, he continued that. Umar came, he continued that as well. So definitely.
So, in what ways does being Muslim transcend borders and culture, and how does that affect on our sense belonging?
Well, I think just as I said, right?
Yes.
When our commitments are one, then I can easily connect to a fellow person, even if they're across the globe. So how do we revive the sentiment? How do we communicate to the global Muslim population? Hey, let's agree. Let's not change our borders. That's too difficult of a task. Let's not change our political structures.
But we need to make it less than what it is
Sure.
now.
But right now, how much resources would it take? How much debt? Like, what would have to happen to change one border, let alone 52 borders or however many Muslim countries there are? You're going to go to war, right? The last thing we want is to go to war with fellow Muslim countries. It's going to cost tremendous resources. It's going to create trauma. Right now is not the time to change those borders. Who cares about the borders, right? The Western world is strong, even though they have borders. They invented the borders.
But they used it to, to separate Muslims from each other.
Sure.
And to control.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely that's part of the history. But the idea is that didn't stop the West. The presence of borders hasn't stopped the West from being a powerhouse. Why? Because they learned how to relate to one another despite the borders. We Muslims, we haven't learned that. A lot of the Muslim countries, I identify as Jordanian or Egyptian or whatever. And then when they cross borders, there are certain stereotypes,
Yeah.
right? We haven't learned. So how do we get around that? And it goes back to what we were just talking about, this ummah, this idea of an ummah. How do we, as Muslims, create a common
Concept
strategic
of-
goals,
Yes.
right? That doesn't require us to remove borders. That doesn't require us to change political structures. Not because they don't need to change, but because right now is not the time. We're not positioned in a way to actually change them. It'll cause way too much harm.
I mean, in the meantime, it's the suitable time to apply ummah to the Muslim countries.
Very suitable.
Especially what we see in Gaza and in Palestine.
That's one thing, right? We have, not to capitalize off of a calamity, but the idea is there's an opportunity to rally the entire the global Muslim community around a cause, right? And to not just say Gaza and that's it. Our cause is Gaza. Gaza is one calamity in this Muslim ummah.
Yes.
You have
But it's
Sudan.
a big reason to
have Yemen.
encourage us to be united.
But what we Muslims constantly fail to do is to take an event and strategically use it to push the Muslim community forward. We look at Gaza. Once Gaza is resolved, what do we go back to doing? Because everybody goes back to their own thing.
No, I mean it's
Versus-
a reason. It's a reason. Especially all of us are affected. I mean, emotionally we are all united, but practically no.
So let me reword what you just said. Emotionally, Muslims love each other,
Yes.
right? They
And
do
we
love
feel
each
each
other.
other,
The
yeah.
average Muslim loves for their fellow Muslim.
Yes.
We've gotten to that level, alhamdulillah, right? However, why doesn't that convert into anything practical, anything tangible? Why do we need Gaza to happen in order to feel this ummah sentiment? And it's because we haven't taken this sentiment to the next level. We haven't made it a type of mission statement. Instead of just looking at Gaza and saying our cause is Gaza,
You mean we need to
we
be
evolve
united
it to where
whether there is Gaza or no?
exactly, right? We evolve it, or we utilize the situation to where we start to create a sentiment that I am responsible for my fellow Muslim, right? The sentiment of wa mu'tasima, right? That even if a random Muslim person, a no-name Muslim person in the corner of an island, right, calls out for the health of Muslims, we are already accepting of the fact that I have to do something about it.
It's our duty to be
Right.
Yeah.
In the world of the West, NATO, for example, what is NATO? What is NATO? It's a collaboration based on strategic goals or common goals. That if one of us gets attacked, it's incumbent upon everyone else,
We have
To
the
defend
duty,
them.
yes, to defend him.
right? They created that culture, that mindset.
Yeah.
This is why when Ukraine happens,
And actually,
oh
this
my
is
God,
this
how
is
can
the
this
concept of
happen?
Ummah, yes.
Oh, you see what I mean here? So what happens is we Muslims, we haven't, evolved our, look, we say ummah, ummah, ummah. Okay, what does that mean? How do I translate that into something more tangible, something more practical? It's not hard. It's very simple. And with Gaza going on, people are ready. Again, we don't have the ability to convince politicians to do that, right? We can hope and make dua that it happens, but we can do it in terms of other elements.
Yes.
And we have social media now. Muslims in Malaysia are watching what Muslims in America are doing. Muslims in America are watching what Muslims in South Africa are doing. Muslims in South Africa are watching what Egyptians are doing, right? So we are interconnected. Now it's about creating those tangible, clear, strategic goals that we already agree on, but more crystallizing it.
But in my point of view, I see that Muslims in the Western country are applied the meaning of Ummah more than the Arab countries and Muslim countries.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, that's because of our situation here, and we are caring about our religion. We are trying to be united here.
Sure. Now, we need to appreciate the fact that America is a cultural powerhouse. What happens here affects everywhere else. So, as I mentioned, people in Malaysia, Indonesia, in Saudi Arabia, and wherever, they are watching what American Muslims are doing on social media. They see
And not
it.
only Muslims, I believe that the world literally turned
Anything that
to,
happens in America,
turned at a small
right?
village.
But the idea is, but America specifically.
Yeah.
You don't see other people in the world dressing up like, let's say, dressing up like Mongolians. They don't have that cultural power. Or Canadians, or French. They might have some cultural power, but America is the cultural power
Cultural
of
power,
the
yes.
world, right? Why that is, I haven't really looked into it, but it is. So what we have is we live in the place that affects the rest of the world. Politically, militarily, culturally. So all these Muslims who are fantasizing about hijrah, fantasizing about going to Turkey or Malaysia or the Gulf or Qatar or wherever. Go, and I promise you, if you're looking for comfort, you're going to be less comfortable there, right? You will find equal racism, even more, in
Yes.
these countries than here, right? And if you want to go there, then I'm going to be blunt about it, you're just running away. You're running away from your responsibilities as a Muslim. You're sick and tired of political Zionism. Where better to challenge that than here?
Yes,
Where?
this is the beginning.
Where? If you're sick and tired of LGBT, where better to challenge that than here? They're transporting it, they're exporting it to other parts of the world.
Exactly, but the source is here.
The source
The
is
start
here.
is here.
The front lines are here. So if you want to run away and live your life just to eat, drink, and go to and play and amuse yourself, by all means, have fun over there. But if you actually want to do something for the ummah, wallahi, I don't see a better place to do it than here.
Yes, and to cut the root from the beginning. And I believe
It's not about cutting the roots, right? We don't have to put ourselves in a very us versus them. No, we participate in this society, as we'll get to one of these questions.
And you have
right?
your own role as Muslim in this
You
society.
have the ability to make an impact.
Yes, exactly. So let's go to the second segment, that's navigating culture and religion. So first question is, how do cultural traditions sometimes conflict with Islamic techniques, and how can we navigate those differences?
Sure. So I've always understood culture as expressing. It's expressing two things. It's expressing certain environmental conditions that are beyond our control. So, for example, places that are hotter are going to adopt certain clothing that allows the body to cool better. Hence, in the Bedouin societies, their clothing, the Middle Eastern clothing, is that way because it's cooler. They've actually tested this.
Yes.
Right? It creates like this chimney of wind within, so it actually keeps the body cooler.
Cool.
That doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense to wear that clothing in a colder part of the
place,
world.
yeah.
Right? It doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
Colder parts of the world are going to adopt certain clothing, right? So there are certain environmental factors, and then there's historical factors, right? Culture is a manifestation or a representation of a people's history. So you look at the kufiya, for example, the Palestinian kufiya.
Yeah.
So apparently each one of these designs, these patterns, represents something of the tradition of the Palestinian people. So one represents a fisher net, one represents the olive tree, and the third one, I forgot what it represents. Even the traditional Palestinian female thobe and the designs, right? It apparently represents something. Slight differences represent different, villages within Palestine. So it's expressing the history, right? Now there's a third thing that culture represents, and that's values. Now in Islam, obviously environmental factors, this is an issue of halal and haram. I mean, it's just environmental factors. History is history, right? If you're representing the trade of a people, it's not that you can't change it. There's nothing unethical about it. It just tends to be, unless their trade happens to be something very haram, that's a different story, right? But in general, it just is. There's no need to highlight that or zero in on that and see if we need to change it. But the third one, definitely, values. Culture is an expression of a people's values. So you look at the way clothing and design of clothing has evolved in the West over the course of the past 100 years. It is reflecting the values of the people and the shift in the values. Obviously, a practicing Muslim is visible.
Yes.
They are visible.
Especially women.
Yeah. Right? They are visible. They visibly have to communicate their values, right? Whereas, Muhammad, I just said a thought in my mind.
So I believe women is more because for myself as a Muslim.
I mean, even a guy, beard. Now beards are popular,
yeah,
right?
but the women as hijab.
As hijab,
niqab,
it's clear, right? It's a message. But the idea is that, Muhammad, I had it and it's left my mind once again. So when you walk around America and you're walking around, everyone else is Christian. Can you differentiate between a practicing Christian and a non-practicing Christian?
No.
When they talk about the rural part of America and they're more conservative, they're more practicing, if someone from the South, from the practicing, the Bible Belt, wherever, right, is walking around LA, can you make them out?
No, you can't.
Until they start speaking with a Southern accent,
exactly,
you can't make them out. But in the Muslim world,
you can, 100%.
Right? You can very quickly.
Yes.
Not everyone, right? Not everyone.
But at least.
But you can tell.
Like 80%,
right?
you can.
So why am I saying this? To put people down? No, absolutely not. The idea is Islam is intentionally designed in a way where you must publicly and visibly communicate your values.
Yeah, that's a good meaning.
You have to.
Yeah.
And even though a man can get away with it, but if you're praying 5 times a day, wallahi, sooner or later, you're going to have to pray in public. You're going to find yourself in a situation where I have to pray here.
Yeah, it happens sometimes. For all of us.
For all of us,
yes.
right? What's my point?
Praying in a parking lot or in your office. Or
Islam has an intention. It's by design. You will communicate your values. It will come about. The Prophet ﷺ was constantly telling us, do things differently than Jews and Christians.
Yes.
Meaning be visible.
Yeah.
Now, just to be clear here, this doesn't mean create animosity.
No, but to show people.
It's to show other. We have our identity.
Exactly.
Even the Qibla. What's the point of the Qibla? Oh, it's to unify the Muslim. Yeah, that's part of it. But there's something bigger. The Qibla is an expression of independence in terms of the way we do things. Right?
And even for myself, even my daughter, when we go to any shop, it shows that she has hijab, so everyone is looking. So that's to show that I'm Muslim. Without asking, without questioning, you can figure out that Muslims, especially women, can be noticed in the markets or in any
right,
place.
But it's not just she's a Muslim. it also says what about a
Yes.
Muslim. A Muslim is modest, right?
And she's practicing Islam.
And note they understand this. They catch the message. Why? Because once I was doing an interfaith panel, and it was a Q&A portion, and a lady, an elderly lady, non-Muslim, asked, what's the deal with these Muslim women who wear hijab but then wear very tight clothing? She understood, like, it's a contradiction, right? So our religion, our aqidah, our lifestyle that we are obligated to follow, right? Salah, zakah, fasting, etc., does more than just express our theology, right? It does more than express our commitment to the Creator. It expresses our values,
Yes.
right?
100%.
Hence, this all goes back to what we began with. Well, how do you define yourself as a human being? Through language, through rationale, but primarily through
Ethics.
values,
And values.
ethics.
Yeah. So, in what ways do Muslims balance their religious identity with the demands of living in a diverse societies practically in the West?
So, the way I'm seeing it now is the following. We have to be more on the offensive side. I don't mean offend other people, offense, defense. In other words, we need to start pumping culture into this world, right? And so we need to have a more aggressive strategy. If people are inventing certain technologies, Muslims need to invent technologies. If people have fashion lines, Muslims need to have fashion lines. If people are making movies, we need to make movies and whatnot. So you might be thinking, aren't we just replicating what they're doing? It's not going so well for them. It's not going so well for them, not because these venues are haram in of themselves, right? Clothing clearly is not an unethical thing. It's not a haram. It's not a haram project. Making movies and whatnot, it's not an inherently unethical thing to do, etc. But where the difference comes in is that culture, as I mentioned, is an expression of values. You can't get away from this. So even in the realm of technology, the way it's formed, how is it shaped? It's shaped by the values. There are laws that regulate technology. Now with social media, now with AI. What's allowed to happen on AI?
What's not?
And what's not, right? What is considered ethical usage of AI versus unethical usage of AI? Since it's the Western world that's creating it and inventing it, or it's being invented here, who's going to dictate the value system that comes out of this? What's allowed, what it's allowed to do, what it's allowed not to do?
This is how we are talking with our kids that social media is good, but you have to use it in a good way regarding your ethics and
Sure,
your
right? But this is like level 1.
Yeah, but level, yeah, it's more
Versus
advanced.
you are the ones who are inventing it, and thus you are inventing it in a way that reflects your values.
Yes.
You
That's
take,
more
for example,
important.
if it's okay for me to be a little bit explicit here, when you look at some of the content, the very haram content, it's illegal,
Yes.
right? In the Muslim world, would that ever be legal?
No.
Absolutely not.
No.
Why not? Because it goes against our values. It doesn't go
Exactly.
against the values here.
We apply our values on.
That's what I'm saying. So when Muslims are the ones who are inventing these things, it's not just they're providing a technology that we can boast about.
No, he's applying the values from the beginning once he's creating
Exactly.
this. Yeah.
Right? Because there are considerations. These aren't dumb people. They're very thorough people. They think about these things. And when capitalism is the primary value that they're creating these technologies within,
So I believe
when somebody's inventing
has
AI,
no values at all.
no, but when somebody's inventing AI, what's the primary goal? How much money am I going to make from this?
Exactly. Not helping.
How
the
are
humanity.
companies using it?
Yeah.
How can I make more money? How can I, reduce my costs? This is how they're thinking of it.
I believe this is applied for the Imam Sharawi rahimahullah. He was explaining the difference between how some Muslim people invented anything to help the humanity versus any other non-believer who created something. He said, this non-believer is seeking money, but you as Muslim is seeking the acceptance and to serve the humanity. So this is
Right?
a big difference between the intention in here and there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I put myself as somebody who, inshallah, is someone who takes Islam seriously and tries to, incorporate Qala Allah and Qala Rasul in what I do. If I'm inventing AI, naturally, and any Muslim who has this sentiment, naturally, if we're inventing AI, the things that are come to my mind or their mind is, how do I use this to help a fellow Muslim?
Yeah.
How
What
do
is
I
the
protect
outcome?
them?
Yeah.
How do I
Help
bring
them to.
yusr to them, ease to them?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll make some money doing it. I might even make a lot of money doing it, but that's only an aspect of the
But the main
process here,
intention is to.
right?
That's why your intention is very important in Islam. That your intention, you're gonna gain hasanat while you
It's
are
not
doing
just
things.
intention, right? It's, I believe this. I live this as a Muslim. I have to care for my fellow human being. I can't make money at the expense of somebody else's well-being. These are values. And anyone who has any affiliation to Islam, any allegiance to Islam, this is somewhere in the heart. We see this in even less practicing Muslims in our community. They have limits.
Yes, they have the red light.
There's a
You
clear red
cannot pass
line,
this. Yeah.
and there might not be the ones you see in the masjid. They might not even their five salahs might even be choppy. But there's still an amount of values,
Yes.
and this is why we Muslims, we have level one is we use the technologies available in a way that's Islamic. Level two is no, we're the ones inventing it. So we need Muslims who create fashion that express our values
Yes.
and make it cool.
And I believe in the meantime, we have a lot of Muslims who invented a lot of things. We have in our community, especially in Orange County, we have a lot of people who has their own inventions, they own big companies that helps also to express Islam and to show that Muslims are not ignorant. They are not only users.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, when a Muslim runs an organization based on Islamic values,
Yeah.
right, how do they interact with a fellow person?
And even if they have some employees who's non-Muslim, they they see how Muslim people is dealing in daily basis, and they may be interested in Islam. And I saw
Exactly,
this
right?
many times, and I believe you saw this.
Exactly.
Yeah. So next question is, can a person's identity as a Muslim differ based on where they live and the culture, background, and how do these differences affect on perception of another within the ummah?
Yeah, so there's going to be certain red lines, right? There are going to be certain elements of our identity that are universal in terms of geography and in terms of temporality, meaning
Yeah.
over time. What it means to be a human being has not changed and will never change in the mind of a Muslim. Our aqidah is what it is today, tomorrow, yesterday, and forever.
It's the same, yeah.
Right? And so there's a foundation, there's a structure, there's a skeleton to the human identity that cannot be changed. Just like the human skeleton, you can't reshape the human skeleton. It's not Play-Doh, right? It is what it is. So there are certain things that must be universal. And this is necessary to create that ummah sentiment, right?
Yeah.
In our country, there's little consensus anymore. I mean, the American population is agreeing less and less, as a whole, is agreeing less and less. Even the Constitution now, what freedom of speech really means, is like there's no longer that consensus, right? So we need an amount of consensus, not an entire consensus. Beyond that, as I mentioned, climate, environment will affect identity expression. History will affect identity expression. I think there's nothing wrong. Excuse me. I don't think there's anything wrong with our brothers and sisters in, say, let's say, in Chechnya and Dagestan, who are warriors, fighters,
Yeah.
of, highlighting that aspect of them. Other parts of the Muslim world, that's not the value that they bring to Islam.
Yeah.
It could be knowledge. We have the best Islamic institutions. You know, the ulama of Azhar
Yeah,
would sit down, extend their feet, and say, "Man a'lamu minna," who's more knowledgeable than us? There's a funny story actually. They received a book called Thubut al-Muslim, or Muslim with Thubut. It's a book in usul from India. They read it and they said, "This guy's more knowledgeable than us." But the idea is, I don't see anything wrong with highlighting an aspect of my culture, my people, that we really thrive on. We need that to happen, because if I'm a young Muslim trying to find my place in this world and I lean more towards knowledge, I know where to go. If I lean more towards the warrior element, I know where to go. So there's nothing wrong. Plus, if we need help, let's go to our brothers and sisters over there. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now we have other communities who are relatively newer to Islam, like the Latino community,
Yeah.
fastest growing Muslim community. They have a very, very rich heritage. And now they're coming in, they're coming in with their heritage. Like they value that. They don't want, it's hard to give it up. And I tell them, you don't give it up. You take your heritage, you insert these new values in them, these Islamic values in them,
apply our
and you
values
produce
on
something
this.
interesting.
Exactly.
Right? This is how we do it. Spectrum Mall, you been there? Spectrum Mall.
Yeah.
Have you noticed the architecture?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know where that's from?
From them?
No, this is yeah, I guess so. This is Andalusian, Moroccan architecture. All of it. From the arches to the chandeliers,
Yes,
to the stars,
it's a little
by the
bit
palm
different
trees.
than the.
Wallahi, there's a ma'dana.
Yes, I
If you
saw
notice
it.
it.
Yeah.
There are domes.
Yes, especially Target. If you see the Target is like a mosque.
Isn't it beautiful?
It's like a mosque.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
But that's just not that's not like a Middle Eastern. That is a combination between Morocco and
Yes.
Spain, Spanish, right? How beautiful that is.
Yeah.
So we want diversity in a cultural expression. Hence the verse, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ
لتعارفوا.
لِتَعَارَفُوا, so that you know one another.
Yes.
How do we get to know other civilizations, other societies? Through culture.
And they represent that to us.
This is the point. I was thinking about this today.
Yeah.
لِتَعَارَفُوا. We always think of this as you get to learn other things from other people. Ma'arifa is not like ta'allum, لِتَعَلَّمُوا. It didn't say so you learn from one another. It said لِتَعَارَفُوا. Because it is in these two realms, the realm of shu'ub, nations, and qaba'il, tribes, that we express culture. So we get to know one another's cultures, cultural expressions, or we get to know one another through their cultural expressions, right? So...
And it's not wrong to take from your culture to my culture. Or
No, I mean, Western, even though I've been, kind of pointing out some of the major gaps and voids in Western culture and some of the problems, there's nothing wrong with taking what the West has to offer. Like, the American Muslim experience needs to be a type of combination between what is, of course, halal, within the realm of halal, what is Western, what is Islamic in values, right? Can the sisters come up with a hijab, a full hijab that has clear Western kind of imagery, but also expresses our values? Now, when a non-Muslim in the West is looking at this hijab, it's not so bizarre. It's not like a sore thumb, like this is way away from me, right? This is a foreigner, this is alien. No, we don't want that.
You can balance between.
You balance the two.
Yes, your aqidah and the current culture of the society that you live in.
Exactly.
Okay, so for the last segment we have today is how to stay grounded. First question is, what's practical steps can young Muslims take to remain grounded in their faith while living in a secular or multicultural society?
Yeah. So, if you're not leading, you're following. If you're not driving, someone is driving you.
Exactly.
If you're not inventing, someone else is inventing for you, right? This is how it is. This is how the world is. If you're not making money, you're losing money. This is the reality. There's nothing that's constant except Rabb al-Alameen, subhanahu wa ta'ala, constant in his perfection. So we Muslims need to become uncomfortable with the fact that we are not the ones driving culture. We are not the ones who are primarily inventing. Well, I heard one brother say something that at the time I didn't realize how problematic it was. He said, these Westerners, they invent all these cool things. We just buy it and we enjoy it. They're saying like it's as though Allah like He uses the West so that we can enjoy whatever
We
they
just
make. That they
follow.
do the work and we just enjoy the fruits of it. Now looking back at it, that's a very naive thing to say.
It wasn't like this in the past, but
Not just forget about the past. Understand the ramifications of that. If they are inventing it, they are inventing it based on their values.
yes,
They will do it in a way where they gain from you. You have to give them, right? And then now you have to constantly be in this battle of my aqidah versus their aqidah, my akhlaq, my morals and ethics versus theirs. It's a struggle.
so this is returning back to your speech about applying aqidah and ethics on what we have in our society now. Even if we are followers, we need to apply our deen
Right.
on what we are having today.
Right. So look at it in one of two ways. We have one of two things, one of two strategies. Either we take what's there and we do it better. Right? Can we do democracy better than the West? Can we do capitalism better than the West? Can we do family better than the West? Can we do fine dining better than the West? Can we do social life better than the West?
Not to take it as is. We cannot take it as is.
Obviously, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes we can take the wheel and just use it better.
Yeah, customize
Right.
it to our
So
to fit our.
when you look at the rise of the Ottomans, right? What was happening then? So once the Mongols came in, and there was no clear superpower, and so what happens when there's no clear superpower? What you have today, as American empire recedes, all these other players are coming in, and they want to become the next superpower. So it's chaotic. That was happening before the rise of the Ottomans. So you had the Ottomans, you had the Mamluks, you had people in Central and South Asia, you had the East as well, you had the West, the Crusaders and whatnot, you had the Mongols, you had all these different factions fighting for power. Ottomans came out on top. Why? For one simple thing, not one simple, but one primary thing. At that time, gunpowder was the new invention, was a new thing.
Yes.
Ottomans didn't invent gunpowder. They didn't discover the use of gunpowder.
So
But
the
they used
reason
it the
was
best.
invention that
No,
helps.
no.
helps
They
them.
didn't invent them. They didn't invent gunpowder. Genghis Khan was using gunpowder, right? So it was new, but it wasn't the discovery of the Ottomans. What the Ottomans did is they took it and they used it the best. We have social media. It's not going anywhere. No need to reinvent social media. Yeah, I understand creating our own companies, that's a different story.
Yeah.
The technology of social media, it's there. What we need to do is use it better.
To improve it, to use it.
To use it better.
Yes.
We can do social media better than you. Right? That's one strategy. Take what's there and just do it better. The other strategy is to invent something new. Right? This is the more longer route, but maybe there's something out there. There's a gap that needs to be filled. There's a need that needs supply, something along those lines for Muslims to come in and provide it. So these are two areas where the Muslims really need to focus. Take what's there and just do it better, or
implement
invent
a
something new.
Yeah. So how do Islamic teachings help us maintain our identity in the face of external pressure or challenges such as peer pressure or social media influences?
Right. So kind of as I was saying, if you're not leading, you're following. Right. So the more aggressive we become in advancing our values, in promoting our values, then by default we're pushing back against something else. If we're not aggressive, there are other very aggressive ideologies. If we're not pushing back against LGBT,
We will be
right,
pushed.
we will be pushed. This is the reality here. So we Muslims in America, I believe we've developed the confidence in what Islam has to offer. Now it's about really pushing it, creating institutions that actually produce these values, that spread these values, that insert them into society. And the more we do that, then by default, the less you'll find of the other side, right? The values that challenge us. Now, of course, the point here isn't to get rid of disbelief, right? That's not the way I'm looking at it. Sure, we'll accept as many Muslims as possible, and of course, calling people to Islam is integral to our experience. But just looking at it from purely a social perspective or question of identity, if we are not promoting our identity, then we're constantly fighting to preserve it, right? So you're either on the offense or you're on the defense.
We need to leave the defense role now.
We have to.
Yeah, we have to.
Because if we're on defense, understand what that means in terms of strategy.
Losing more.
It's not just losing more. Defense means there's another side
Who's
that's
attacking
constantly
you.
attacking.
Yeah.
And now we have to do what? React. And so long as we are reacting, we are under their control. The only thing we can do is wait for them to do something, and then we have to react. This is how the Muslim community is now. We're always reacting. And we've gotten good at reacting. Like, we're very effective
Not
at reacting.
acting, but reacting on.
But now
their-
we need to be proactive.
Yeah.
No, we're going to take the first step this time.
So,
But we're not going to wait for someone else to do
as
it.
they say, the best way to defense is to attack.
Right? The best defense is an offense.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So, what role does community, I mean, mosques, Islamic Center, play in helping Muslims to stay connected to their faith and identity?
Right. So you need that social experience. It reinforces
This is,
it,
I
right?
believe, this is the most important question now.
It reinforces it. However, where we're at now, specifically Southern California, right now we need to organize ourselves. We don't lack any resources, not monetary resource, not intellectual resource, not numbers, human resource. What we lack is organizing all of these talents into something more efficient, more effective, right? We don't have a scarcity in resources. We have a scarcity in skilled professionals being in the proper places, right? There are Muslim billionaires. There are Muslim CEOs. There are Muslim scholars in all sectors of this economy, right? So we're there. We just need to organize ourselves. Wallahi, there are Muslims who can open so many doors for younger Muslims. We need to create institutions or programs that facilitate this.
And that is very important.
And we need to revise some of our strategies.
Educate the new generation is a big responsibility on us.
Not just educating them, opening doors for them, right? We have the first generation of at least immigrant Muslims who are incredibly successful. They are kind of in the system, so to speak. They could open doors. Who are they going to pass their companies down to? Normally it's a child, but what if they don't have, what if that's not there? They can help other Muslims start new companies, right? So it's about organizing all of this. That's what community is. The community sentiment is there. Muslims love their fellow Muslims.
Yes, sure.
They just don't, either they don't know how to express that, how to, live by that, how to act upon that, or they know how to, but they can't find the place to do it.
Or someone to give them advice or to navigate in the
Right.
yeah. So I believe in our society, or at least in Southern California, I saw a lot of people from the first generation that helps a lot of our youth and our teenagers, especially in the events of helping Muslim to understand their community and to understand the deen. Also, in the other side and practical side, that a lot of companies who's directed by Muslims, they offered a lot of job offer especially for Muslims. So they have their own rule towards the community, and that's good. For the meantime, I believe
It's good, but let's not go to an extreme.
Yes.
Right? We have a duty to interact with non-Muslims, right? We don't want to, the ummah concept is to erode tribalism. We're not going to replace it with a different type of, like a Muslim tribalism, right? Our role isn't to put others down. Our role is to lift humanity.
No, I mean the priority
Rahmatan
is
lil alameen,
yes,
right?
sure.
Mercy to all of mankind. And so, we want to help our fellow Muslims. We want to grow, but we don't want to do that
To be
in a
close
way
on ourselves.
to become enclosed or isolated. Right? We have to engage the fellow Muslim, and there are models of this kind of it's us and we need to protect us and it's only us and everybody else is our enemy
Yeah.
and whatnot.
No.
It's not a healthy strategy.
Yeah. Okay, so as we wrap today's episode on what is Muslim identity in the modern world, let's recap some of the key takeaways. We explored the core elements that shapes Muslim identity from faith to culture and how these elements come together to define who we are as Muslims today. We discussed the balance between cultural traditions and Islamic teaching and how important it is to navigate these two aspects without compromising our faith. Also, we talked about the challenges of living in a diverse, often secular society and how we can stay grounded to our beliefs, particularly through strong connections to our community and to self reflection. Finally, we looked at the particular steps, practical steps young Muslims can take to identify while handling external pressure, especially in a changing world. Before we close, I want to take a moment to thank our guest for today's episodes, Sheikh Tariq Ata. Thank you very much,
Okay,
Sheikh.
exactly for the invitation.
Your insights and perspectives on what it means to be a Muslim in the modern world has truly enriched our discussions.
I hope so, inshallah.
Yeah, it's been incredibly valuable hearing your thoughts on how we can maintain a strong Muslim identity while balancing the challenges today's society. We appreciate your time, wisdom, and contribution to the conversation. Thank you so much
Jazakumullah khair.
of being with us today, and we hope to have you back in the future for more enlightful discussions.
Inshallah, it'd be my honor.
Yeah, thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.